Oh, well, great. I'm trying not to start the class with all right, but between memories of Swahananda and Swami Prabhutananda, it's kind of hard to drop that habit. It just pops out. All right, here we go. So we're digging into Jnana Yoga, uh, the path to God of knowledge, not of relative knowledge, but a knowledge of the way things within the absolute the relative are, a knowledge that exists actually before the mind holds it. Oh well, I guess if you take mind as Brahman, pure mind, that wouldn't be true either. Let me think of how to start the class today. Just a moment. This knowledge that's inherent in us, let's put it that way, this knowledge of self, this knowledge of being, which is obvious but not apparent. For some reason, it just doesn't soak in, even though all of the evidence for the truth of the Vedanta is readily available to us. We don't put it together that way. We don't see it that way. We create a narrative out of it because we're more interested in our own existence in it. We're as a particular, as this body mind. And so we ignore a lot of the evidence, and that's where ignorance comes from, ignorance. We ignore most of the obvious evidence that these things are true, mostly because all of it points to our dissolution. All of it points to our, as a personality self, as an ego self. It points to the unreality of that, to the dissolution of that, and we're quite attached to that idea, and so we don't often see it. And so that's why our investigation into these things has to produce a dispassion. We have to accept the fact that everything goes, including our body, and including our ego, our sense of self, our sense of separateness. And of course, that's terrifying because it's like falling into the dark. You don't know what you're going to hit, and so it's scary. But what we end up hitting is absolute love, pure love. We become the whole, and so we finally find that contentment and that fulfillment and that wonder. But we have to go around and face the dissolution of this world and ourself in it. It's always good to remember that you're a walking corpse. I sincerely tell you that's my practice. When I look in the mirror in the morning, first thing I do is laugh and notice all of the new signs of aging, signs of diminishment that this body's going. And to let that soak in. But I there's no sadness around it. I find it hilarious, to watch these things happen and to really work on that kind of mind frame. There's no need for fear. There's no need for sadness. There's no need for a sense of melancholy that we're leaving anything behind, because we're not. We're walking into the fulfillment of everything we've tasted, touched, and smelled and heard in this world. We're walking into the fulfillment of it. All of it so far for us has been a symbol. Everything in our world that we've created in the mind is just a symbol, and all of it is reflecting or pointing toward our divine nature. And so we're walking away from walking toward what everything has been pointing at, and walking away from all of the pointers. We're just going to walk into that oneness, into that beauty. And so, and dissolve as we go. But with each dissolution, the sense of bliss increases, the sense of equanimous love increases, a joy fills our being finally, So it's quite a wonderful thing. So, all right. So I just muted everybody, but you're always welcome, as you know, to unmute, to ask or add or question, challenge, whatever you're in the mood for. To just to take it deeper and to learn more. All right, so we're on the section called the Jnani, section 15. And I highlighted the verse, not the verse, but the Q&A couplet just before where we ended, because it was such a beautiful thing. The questioner says, are you the devotee or the object of devotion? He's asking Maharaj, as an enlightened person, are you the devotee or are you the object of devotion? And Maharaj replies, I am neither. I am devotion itself. Which, of course, you remember I got very excited about that, because I had sort of, well, anyway, I got very excited about that. And because that's the first time I saw it in writing, but it was something I had suspected for a while, just from the experience of that meditation. It's like that the two, we know that your ideal, your chosen ideal in your mantra meditation, your chosen ideal and yourself in the bhakti world. I guess I'm violating some tenets of the class, except that I really believe they're the same. But in our bhakti practice, we see God within that divine. We have an image of him, but it's a symbol, right? Because we can't possibly conceive of the real God. He's not going to fit in the mind as such. And so we have that incomplete ideal of God, and we have an incomplete understanding of ourselves. So we've got two wrong views that are facing each other. The devotee, which we really don't understand, and the divine that the devotee is devoted to, that we don't understand. And what happens in that is that neither one of these understandings is going to become perfect. It's impossible. So bhakti yoga, in a way, look what's happening again. Bhakti yoga, yeah, there it is. Bhakti yoga is just that. But bhakti yoga is both of those incomplete aspects merge into the love that is God. So God sneaks in, literally sneaks in from the back door, from behind your ego, from behind your mind. God sneaks in and fills that room with himself, which we see as devotion, which we see as the experience of love. Why? Because God obviously is that love. And so it's a marvelous, I think that's such an exciting thing to think about, that wonderful atmosphere within you that you create in the shrine of the heart between you and the divine mother, the chosen ideal, or that existence, that awareness, however you want to frame it in your mind is fine. It's going to happen in the same anyway. That those two incompletes are going to dissolve into a very unsuspected third, the love, the presence of the divine. And see, this is really cool, because this is also what's happening around you all the time when you fall in love with somebody. The same thing. The two of you, both forms of ignorance, are manifesting God in the love that you feel for one another. When you feel compassion, when you feel a sense of service, when you feel a sense of camaraderie or brotherhood or sisterhood with the world around you, when you serve out there, when you just have a happy thought towards somebody on the bus that you don't even know or not talking to. All of these things manifest God. And the exciting thing to me about that is that if you don't see God, you have the possibility of changing that, manifest that divine by manifesting the love that's within you. That is your beloved, and the surest sign of the presence of the beloved. And so this is quite a wonderful thing here, where he says, I am neither. I am devotion itself. And then our questioner says, well, there's not enough devotion in the world, Maharaj. You are always after the improvement of the world. Take that to heart, you're always after the improvement of the world. Do you really believe that the world is waiting for you to be saved? Oh, just think about how ridiculous it is that we think that we have enough information to judge the world, to find it in need of something, as if, right? I mean, everything that we know about the world, we couldn't even fill a book with. And yet there's the Encyclopedia Britannica, which fills a whole shelf, for those of you who are old enough to know what an encyclopedia is. So that fills a whole shelf. And then you've got the Library of Congress, which, has millions of those shelves. And still the world is not known. And so for us as an individual to think that we have a perspective on the world that could figure out how to fix it is quite laughable, quite hilarious. So this idea of running around thinking of how you're going to improve the world is an absurdity. If you think you're going to be the one to improve the world, it's nonsense. You can improve your world, But the improving of your world has entirely to do with you improving yourself. Nobody else needs to change for the world to change, just you. And so turn that idea around. Don't go out there to change the world. Go in here to change your world, and you'll witness the world change. It's an amazing thing. You're always after the improvement of the world. Do you really believe that the world is waiting for you to be saved? Questioner: I just do not know how much I can do for the world. All I can do is to try. Is there anything else you would like me to do? Maharaj: without you, is there a world? You know all about the world, but about yourself, you know nothing. Well, welcome everybody that's just now joining. Seems like we had a bus arrive. So we're reading Sri Nisargadatta's I Am That, and we're on the section called the Gyani, or the Knowers, and we're talking about devotion, and how the Gyani, as the realized soul, has said that he was asked, are you the devotion or the object of devotion? And he says, I'm neither. I am devotion itself, which is a beautiful thing. So we're talking about the manifesting of the divine by manifesting love, manifesting devotion in whatever we're doing. And then in that way, if we haven't seen God, that way you can see God. You just haven't known what you're looking for. You've been staring straight at him. I saw a YouTube video a while back where a young man goes to visit his mother who he hasn't seen in like 5 years or something. And they've taken her family's taken her out to a restaurant. So he acts as the waiter, at the restaurant. And he kind of disguises himself with a hat and glasses and whatnot. And so he's waiting on her at the table, and she doesn't recognize him. But something catches her eye at one point, and she looks at him, then she looks at him again. She's not sure what's going on, and she's about to say something to him, and he takes the disguise off, and there's this wonderful encounter between mother and son after such a long time, such a great deal of love. And so really, this is what we're experiencing in spiritual life. I know I'm making this awfully devotional for a Jnana class, but follow it. You'll see they do come together. There's not a difference in them. They're just paths to the same place. And so this love, this not seeing God, is because we haven't learned to recognize God as love, and to see that love everywhere manifesting. The way everything is nurtured in the world, everything is taken care of in the world. So Maharaj is saying, so the questioner has just finished saying, I don't know how much I can do for the world. All I can do is try. Is there anything that you would have me do? And Maharaj says, without you, is there a world? What do you think we're working on together? What are you thinking? You know all about the world, but about yourself, you know nothing. You yourself are the tools of your work. You have no other tools. Why don't you take care of the tools before you think of the work? Right? Learn about the tools. Learn about your nature. If the more you learn about yourself, the more you know of the world, because you produce the world. You've created this world of symbols within your own mind. There is no outside out there, although that seems counterintuitive, because the mind, anything the mind doesn't fully understand, it places outside of itself. Things that it fully knows, it places inside of itself. So it's an arbitrary boundary. It's not a real boundary. It doesn't exist in nature. There's no separation between you and the whole. The questioner: I can wait while the world cannot. Maharaj: by not inquiring, you keep the world waiting. Right? By not knowing who you are, you continue to harm the world. Right? If you don't know yourself as love, then you're being motivated by things other than love. And if that's the truth, is it not you who needs to be fixed? It's not the world. It's you, because if you do not know yourself as pure love and do not know yourself as pure wisdom, then what is it that it's motivating you in the world? It's your selfishness, your hungers, your thirsts, your desires, all of them based on a misunderstanding, which is why anything done from egoism ultimately is unhappy. Ultimately will blow up in our hands. That's why it's so important for us to figure out what we are. What is our relationship with this experience, this being? And what is it that wants to know? Who is it that's asking this inside? So as long as you're not inquiring, as long as you're not working on toward your identity, toward knowing your uninterpreted self, you do harm to the world, whether you mean to or not. And yes, everything's a mixed bag. It's not like you're a piece of evil walking around destroying everything. It's all a mixed bag because our ignorance is mixed, right? But to purify our ignorance, to get rid of our confusion about what we are, allows us to become light, allows us to become a positive influence in every circumstance, regardless of what that circumstance is. And so this is why we practice. This is why we try and answer this question: who am I? What am I? By not inquiring about yourself, you keep the world waiting. And questioner, waiting for what? Maharaj, for somebody who can save it. The questioner, God runs the world, God will save it. Maharaj, that's what you say. Did God come and tell you that the world is his creation and concern and not yours? Questioner, well, why should it be my sole concern? Maharaj, consider the world in which you live. Who else knows about it? I love these questions. I love these questions. Who else knows about the world in which you live? You see, that's the piece of obvious that we don't see as obvious. It's not apparent to us. Nobody can know your world. Nobody can know your inner life. That's where your world exists. It exists within you, within your mind. And even if you try and tell somebody about it, as we've pointed out in past conversations, all you can do is give them sound symbols, words. That's all you can give them, is more symbols. And they have to supply the reality to apply to those symbols to try and understand what you're talking about. There's no way of letting somebody inside you to know your world. And that's that's the intimacy of God. That's one of the most profound things, is when you the ego self, have the experience of God suddenly being in your world as a real, not as an imagined entity, as something more real than the imagination you call the world. And the first time that happens, you're forever changed. You can never believe this place again. You'll always have a little twinkle in your eye when you when you talk about it, or when you look at it, or when you experience it, because that reality, when it comes to you directly, not through symbols, whether it's symbols of the senses, or where it's symbols of the mind, or whether it's symbols of words coming through your imagined ears, all of that is symbols, symbols everywhere. That's why you have this frustration inside. That's why you feel like you can't be touched, you can't love enough. When you embrace your partner, you can't embrace them tight enough, because really what you're wanting to do is to have you two disappear into each other. And that's what we're wanting from this whole world. When you drink eggnog, you just don't want to just enjoy eggnog. You want to be fully, you just want eggnog being poured all over you. Having every pore of your body become a taste bud. That's the only way that eggnog would really be fulfilling. And it's the same with everything, isn't it? I mean, it's the same with everything. You get your favorite thing, and even as you're getting it, you're disappointed because you know that it's going to be over in a second or two, and it's just this terrible tease. And so, coming to this understanding is how we reach our renunciation. It's how we reach we get a dispassion that matches our passion, so that we're no longer stuck and controlled by the belief that something out there is going to fulfill us. And doggone it, I'm going to spend my life trying to find it, But we are always looking for objects when we talk like that. We're never talking about the self. We're never talking about what's within, because we don't have to go find that. We just have to open and recognize that. So consider the world in which you live. Who else knows about it? You're the only one that knows your world. The questioner says, well, you know, everybody knows, right? That's our assumption. We live in an external world, so we all know the world that we live in. That's our assumption, but that's a wrong assumption because we don't. We don't live in a world that everybody shares. We live in a mind that has created a world of symbols to explain a universal mind within which we all live. But the world of objects, the world of the material world that we've created through symbology in our mind is not shared by everybody. We do not see the same thing. We do not understand the same thing. And we have no way of proving that or verifying the opposite. That's why it's just the unknown. The thing in itself, according to Kant, the thing in itself cannot be known, right? We can only know the symbols that we created for it. Maharaj, did anybody come from outside of your world to tell you? Myself and everybody else appear and disappear in your world. We are all at your mercy. Right? Fantastic. So Maharaj saying, look, you don't keep me in your world all the time. I come in for a little bit and then I'm gone for a little bit. You know, I can't depend on your world. Do you know your world? So it's, you see, when a seer looks at us, he says these funny things like this because they're obvious things that we just never occur to us. We just think, well, gosh, we just assume that everybody still exists if they're not in our world, you know, I was thinking about my parents yesterday, and thinking about they're getting old. They're in their 80s and they're going to pass away. And I felt a tinge of sadness, but I started discerning, started thinking about it. I was like, well, gosh, they're not in my world. What will change when they go? Because they haven't been in my daily world for years now, for decades now. And so this imagining, that's a big thing for them to be physically present in my world when they haven't been in a long time. You see, and if you analyze that, you kind of realize it's like, how am I in this moment? This is one of the things that the Gyani does quite a bit. Bring it back down to your moment. This is my world. There's not another person in my world right now. It's just me in my room looking at a Zoom screen, feeling a lot of the divine presence because there's a lot of love in this group. And I appreciate that so much. But in my reality, I'm alone in a room, in Colorado somewhere, presumably. It doesn't even really have a name. I'm just here and I'm just now, and there's nothing else. And if you can find your contentment in this here and this now with nothing else, that's the magic. That's your being. That's the point of our investigation, is that you will ultimately learn that you are in an ecstatic state of love always, as long as you know who you are, as long as you know what this universe is. And so our process of thinking, of questioning, is to constantly point at our assumptions, poke at them, to say which one's an assumption and which one's real. Do any of them, do I actually know anything? Or do I have just a bunch of thoughts in my head that swim around with each other and create wonderful illusions for me? So consider the world in which you live. Who else knows about it? Well, you know. Everybody knows. Maharaj, well, did anybody come from outside of your world? Have you ever seen anybody come from outside of your world? That's the question. To tell you, myself and everybody else appear and disappear in your world. We are all at your mercy. Questioner, it cannot be so bad. I exist in your world as you exist in mine. Maharaj, you have no evidence of my world. You are completely wrapped up in the world of your own making, right? You have no evidence of my world. I don't live in a world. For a seer, he doesn't live in a world at all. The world lives in him is the first thing. The world lives in him. And second of all, he is that world, right? And the nature of that world is divine. That nature of that world is ever changing, unrepeating, and without meaning until it meets him. You have no evidence of my world. You are completely wrapped up in the world of your own making. You have no access to my world. Questioner, I see. Completely, but hopelessly? Maharaj, within the prison of your world appears a man who tells you that the world of painful contradictions, which you have created, is neither continuous nor permanent and is based on a misapprehension. He pleads with you to get out of it by the same way by which you got into it. You got into it by forgetting what you are, and you will get out of it by knowing yourself as you are. Things like that run a chill through me at times, you know. I would love again to pull this up tonight at midnight in the quiet of my dark room, you know, in the stillness of a sleepy mind, and to read that paragraph again. It's going to be amazing. It'll be wonderful. Within the prison of your world, appears Sri Nisargadatta, appears a teacher. Within the prison of your world appears a man who tells you that the world of painful contradictions, which you have created, is neither continuous nor permanent, and is based on a misapprehension. He pleads with you to get out of it by the same way by which you got into it. You got into it by forgetting what you are, and you will get out of it by knowing yourself as you are. There's quite a bit locked up in that, knowing yourself as you are. You know, the first thing we do is go into our mind to contemplate that. What am I as I am? We ask the mind. And then the mind picks up all of its memories, picks up all of its misunderstandings, grabs a big bundle of its ignorance, and weaves a nice sweater of explanation for you to put on. You know, this is what you are as you are. This is who you are, you know, and he'll use all of your attributes to describe yourself to you. But we want to know who we are as we are, not as we're being told we are by the description of either our senses or the senses of someone else. We exist before our senses. So how do we come to know ourselves before our senses? This is the practice of silence. To sit in silence, receptive silence, you know, an expectant silence in the presence of just being. The questioner, well, in what way does that affect the world? Maharaj, when you are free of the world, then you can do something about it. As long as you are a prisoner of it, you are helpless to change it. On the contrary, whatever you do will aggravate the situation. Right? This brings us to that notion. What he's talking about here is that in order to have that still realization of what you are requires a still mind, a quiet mind. And to have that quiet mind requires you to sit on the edge of the absolute and observe the mind. We are lost in our mind most of the time. We're just between thoughts always. And it's like being in the swimming pool. I've shared this image quite a bit, but it's a very important one. It's like being in a swimming pool and you're trying, you know, I remember when I was in high school, I was in the swim team, and, you know, I'd go to the pool at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that pool would just be like a piece of glass. There would be not a single ripple in it. And then a single person dives into that pool and the entire pool turns into what it usually looks like, just a constant bunch of waves. If you're in that pool and you're trying to still the waves, every movement that you make to still the waves creates new waves. You see, you're trying to do an impossible thing. You can't still the mind while you're identified with it, while you're smack in the middle of it. You have to get a sense of yourself separate and apart from thought, separate and apart from conditions, separate and apart from the senses, separate and apart from being an object. You can't see yourself as an object. As long as you see yourself as an object, you're in the mind. And as long as you're in the mind, you can't still the mind. So you have to lose this idea of a self, lose this idea of a particular. That's what happens when the mind stills. You understand that you're not a particular, you're not in time, you're not caused, you're not affected. You are that. You're at that stillness, that oneness, without any kind of dissolution. That is, of course, that's realization. We don't have to be all the way that far. We just have to have a sense of that. Mother will take care of the rest. But just get as close to the edge of the pool as you can, which means practice being the witness. Practice being the witness, just the witness, not the doer. The doer is in the pool trying to flatten the waves. The witness is sitting on the edge of the absolute, on the side of the pool, watching the water, watching the pool, and resisting the urge to reach out and try and flatten a wave or to pull up a well. You just sit there just watching. And just by doing that, the pool will still of its own accord. Why? Because that's the nature of the pool. The nature of the mind is stillness. The nature of the mind is a direct portal toward the divine, toward God, And so we sit there. When you are free of the world, Maharaj says, you can do something about it. As long as you are a prisoner of it, you are helpless to change it. On the contrary, whatever you do will aggravate the situation. Questioner, righteousness will set me free. Maharaj, righteousness will undoubtedly make you or your world a comfortable, even a happy place. But what is the use? There is no reality in it. It cannot last. Right? So it's this world that's like Thakur calls it the dog's curly tail. It's like, yes, you can go try and straighten that tail. Yes, you can practice your righteousness. You can practice your loving. All of these doerships, sure. And it will improve your relationship with your imagined world. It may even make it a happy place for you. But it's still going to go away. It's still going to disappear. It's still going to require constant maintenance on your part. So really, what's the point? Transcend it. Don't surrender to it. Surrender to the higher notion. Surrender to the truth. Righteousness will undoubtedly make your world a more comfortable, even happy place. But what is the use? There is no reality in it. It cannot last. Questioner, God will help. Maharaj, to help you, God must know your existence. But you and your world are dream states. In dream, they may suffer agonies. None knows them, and none can help you. This one would take some contemplation to think about. So God will help. But to help you, God must know your existence. And you're saying, well, of course God knows my existence. But see, this is the whole point. You are that, and you don't know who you are. Right? So God does not know your existence. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to become aware of our existence, not as a figment in the dream, but as the sleeper, as the dreamer itself. And so this is what he's saying there. To help you, God must know your existence. But you and your world are dream states, right? So the sleeper does not know about the dreamed, and the dreamed does not know about the sleeper. And so how can the sleeper help the dreamed when the sleeper is sleeping? In its stillness, his world is silent, perfect, and restful. Your world in the dream can be whatever that dream is presenting. So yes, God can help you, but that's not the answer you think it is. The truth of that answer is that is you who has to become aware of God, the sleeper, while you're dreaming.
Maharaj, I had a thought. Maybe do you think when he says to help you, God must know of your existence, is he talking about God as Brahman here? If you talk about it in the Jnanic sense, so
Yeah,
in the Advaitic sense, then these are appearances and not real, like our existence or the world. So if he says God must know of yourself, but the Brahman is really not aware, not I mean, is aware, but does not have any direct relationship with the appearance. Um, so
right.
perhaps,
So Brahman is not aware. Brahman is
right,
aware, right? And so yes, those two have to be rectified, as it were. They'll never be rectified because this world will always be, and the absolute will always be. Their fire and its heat.
right, right,
It's always
correct.
there. And so it's the fire and its power to burn, they say. Well, mind is the fire, and its power to burn is thought, thinking. And the two can never be separated, but only the mind is the real. The thoughts are constantly changing and fluttering, and don't have an inherent existence. They're just a potential, a constant potential. So the truth of this world is a constant potential, which is the unchanging moment. The moment is full of potential for anything. Anything can happen in the moment, but it's going to choose a particular. And so something happens instead of anything or everything happening.
Mhm.
Now, interestingly enough, though, that's sort of challenged in that movie, Everything All at Once, Everywhere, Everything Everywhere All at Once, or something like that. Because in there they posit that every option is happening. The full potential of the moment is unfolding. So like every time you make a decision, a new universe is created where the other decision was made, or a different decision was made. And so with every fork in the road you meet, the universes multiply and multiply and multiply and multiply and exist simultaneously, so that all possibilities are happening at every moment, which is kind of an interesting distillation into material of what he's sort of saying here. To help you, God must know your existence, but you and your world are dream states. There's nothing to know in them, there's nothing real in them. In dream, you may suffer agonies, but none knows them, and none can help you because they're imagined, right? If you're sitting there having a nightmare, and even if I'm in the same room with you, the best I can do is wake you up, right? Which ironically, that's what all the sages are trying to do for us. They're trying to wake us up because they can't really help us within the world in which we live, because that world doesn't exist and isn't really there. So they can't come into the dream and help us as such. A very narrow metaphor here, but uh, the best they can do is wake us up. So the best you can do to fix your world is to wake up from it. Understand that it was a dream, that you created something unreal out of something real. All right. Questioner. So all my questions, my search, my study, they're of no use? Maharaj. These are but the stirrings of a man who is tired of sleeping. They are not the causes of awakening, but early signs. But you must not ask idle questions to which you already know the answers. Okay. Let me suggest that this means what we're talking about in a very different way from what it sounds. You must not ask idle questions to which you already know the answers. Now that seems like just don't ask stupid questions, but he's pointing to something much more profound here. And what he's pointing to is what we've talked about with these conversations in your mind. When you posit a question in your mind and answer it, you already know the answer to that, because the voice in your mind that's asking the question, and the voice that eventually answers that question are sourced in the same self. So you didn't discover anything new, even though you might have created new relational objects in your mind to hold that idea. You didn't create or learn anything new. And so stop asking questions that exist in the mind. That's what he's saying. So ultimately, what he's saying here is shut up. Just be quiet. Any question you posit in your mind, you already know an answer to. That's the only way questions get answered. We become aware of the answer. We become aware of the knowledge within. It's always a eureka. It's always an uncovering of a knowledge that's already existing within us. All discovery is that way. It's why they call it discovery. Newton didn't create gravity, and he wasn't the first one to observe it, but he was the first one to be aware of it. Possibly. I mean, I'm sure there could have been some other less well-connected person who sat under a tree and watched an apple fall and wondered about it. But you see what we're saying, though? It's like the answers to the questions that we're trying to find don't exist in language, don't exist in relative thinking. The answer to our question is before that, before all of it. And the only way to hear the answer to that question is through awareness itself, through an absolute silence, all-permeating awareness. Then things percolate up to us from the infinite. Like Thakur says, that which arises in silent mind is the voice of the divine. Right? So he's saying, don't go in here. To get your answer won't be there. The methods might be there, but the answer isn't there. How am I to get a true answer, Maharaj? By asking a true question, non-verbally. By daring to live according to your lights. A man willing to die for truth will get it. Right? By asking a true question, non-verbally. See, that's exactly what we were just talking about. Don't verbalize a question because the answer cannot be verbalized. You're not talking about something from within the mind that has a linear structure, that has a time structure, a past, present, and a future, a relative reality with cause and effect. The answer cannot take that form. So obviously the question cannot take that form. And so ask the real question non-verbally, which really is just an opening of your inner world in awareness. Just go inside and turn yourself inward and open everything. Turn all of your senses, turn all of your mind into a satellite dish of hearing, and just listen in that stillness. And the answer is there, apparent. But it won't come up in words. It won't come up in images. It will come up in an ecstatic dissolution. By asking a true question, non-verbally, but by daring to live according to your lights. A man willing to die for truth will get it. Questioner. Another question. There is the person. There is the knower of the person. There is the witness. Are the knower and the witness the same, or are they separate states? Maharaj. The knower and the witness are two or one? Is that what you're asking? He's wondering. The knower and the witness are two or one? When the knower is seen as separate from the known, the witness stands alone. When the known and the knower are seen as one, the witness becomes one with them. So as long as you see something other than yourself, you do not understand yourself. You do not know yourself. As long as that's the case, as long as you see objects in front of you and know them to be separate from you, then the witness stands alone. Has to just stand up there observing, alone, outside of the whole system, outside of all objects. It's the observer of all. When the known and the knower are seen as one, when that triad begins to collapse, the knower, the known, and the relationship between them, when that triad collapses into a singularity, the witness becomes one with them, but has nothing to witness. So it's pure isness. There is no other. So there's no sense of separateness. There is simply being, which is pure love, pure wisdom, and eternity, eternal infinity. Questioner, who is the Gyani, the witness or the supreme? Maharaj, the Gyani is the supreme and also the witness. He is both being and awareness. In relation to consciousness, he is awareness. In relation to the universe, he is pure being. Right? So with this here again, he's making his distinction that we talked about between consciousness and awareness, right? Consciousness, according to Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, is awareness with objects in it. That's what consciousness is. Awareness with objects in it. But pure awareness is God, is the one without a second. So the Gyani is the supreme and also the witness. So the knower's both, supreme and the witness. He's both being and awareness, right? Being as in it has the sense of existence in it, the sense of self-aware, a certain degree of self-awareness in it. He's both being, so he's both the heat of the fire and awareness, which is the fire. So you're both. In relation to consciousness, he is awareness. So even though consciousness and awareness are very close to the same, it's just that consciousness has objects in it. So there's at least some sense of egoism is in consciousness, some sense of other is in that consciousness. In relation to the universe, in relation to the whole, he is just pure being, pure isness, which plays freely between fire and its power to burn, but attached to neither, the container of both, right? So that's pure being. In relation to the universe, you're the dancer who can either dance or not dance, or both at the same time, which actually they have done that in what are they, here comes an ignorant man talking about quantum physics. But I read in Wired magazine, so you know by the source alone what kind of physicist I am. I read in Wired magazine that they had put a particle into the state of moving and unmoving at the same time. Those are things not for the mind. Those are things for the self. Those are things that you will see the truth of when you see yourself as both moving and unmoving, which means seeing yourself as both the flame and the heat of the flame simultaneously in a unity, not separate. This is, yes.
So when I was reading this earlier, I kind of wanted to clarify it for myself. In relation, when he's talking about consciousness, I was thinking, is it the I am that he talks about? Because this I am is in relation to the body and the world, right? So, so when he says in relation to consciousness, he's awareness. So he's aware. So being aware of awareness, when we talk about that, so he's saying the awareness is the awareness of being the I am, which is in relation to the body and the world. And when he says in relation to the universe, he's pure being, the thought came that he's talking about that he's existence. Is that what? So his existence, when you think of the world, which when we say is the isness. So is that what you were also saying, or thinking differently?
We have to be careful because any answer that we give here is going to be stained a little bit, right? The way that I see it is the fire and its power to burn, to be aware of both of those, where what he is talking about being the witness. That's the I am. I think that when he makes the distinction in relation to the universe, he's pure being. It's no longer I am, it's just I. There's no verb. There's only now. Yeah. So the I am is God, the personal God. The I existing in a relative, in its power to burn. But the pure I is just that isness without change, without object, without separateness, without attribute. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the questioner, and what about the person? What comes first, the person or the knower? You sort of get the feeling this guy's sort of making up questions as he's going along here. Maharaj, the person is a very small thing. Actually, it's a composite. It cannot be said to exist by itself. Unperceived, it is just not there. It is but the shadow of the mind, the sum total of memories. Pure being is reflected in the mirror of the mind as knowing. What is known takes the shape of a person, based on memory and habit. It is but a shadow or a projection of the knower onto the screen of the mind. All right, so let's read that again. The person is a very small thing. And actually, it's a composite of things. So your personhood is a composite of all of your memories, all of your preferences, all of your aversions, all of your desires. Vivekananda describes it as just a set of limitations and restrictions. So this person that you are is just a set of limitations and restrictions. So it's a composite. It's composed of limitations and restrictions, which can also be known as attributes, right? So it's a composite. It cannot be said to exist by itself, because when you withdraw from it, the body drops. The body does not have any sentience or any reality in and of itself. When you pull yourself from it, it drops and becomes potting soil. Unperceived, it is just not there, right? Like I was saying about my parents, I look around the room, I cannot perceive them. Why? Because they're not there. So if they're not perceived, they're not there. They belong to the senses. It is but the shadow of the mind, right? Okay, this shadow of the mind, this is a wonderfully interesting perspective here. I ran into this idea again the other day in a vlog. It's the notion that God's light is everywhere, right? Light permeates everything in this created universe, because light, love, and God are all synonyms. And you can see that even in this light, it can be a particle and it can be a wave. It can be action or it can be the thing itself. You know, it can be both and is both simultaneously. So light is probably the first direct manifestation of the divine, perhaps. And so this whole world is just light, just composed. Everything here is composed of light, right? The reason we see things is because we cast a shadow, right? In the night sky, everything is black because there's nothing to cause a shadow. There's nothing to reflect that light back to you. So the light just flows unreflected, and light flowing unreflected is black. Light flowing reflected is whatever color is being reflected, whatever portion of the light is being reflected. So in a sense, we are the shadows of that light. We are the thing that blocks the light and reflects it. And that creates a sense of being. So we're a shadow of the mind, the sum total of memories, right? So this is our composite self. Pure being is reflected in the mirror of the mind, right? So awareness reflects in the mind, and we then become aware of the objective world within. So we see awareness reflected in the mind, which becomes consciousness. And then as we gather information in through the senses and the experience, we create objects. It formulates objects within this consciousness, which makes the awareness conscious. And iPhone 8 has just joined. I don't know who that is. So we'll start. The person is a very small thing. A person is a composite. A person does not exist by itself. If he's not perceived, he's not there. He is really just a shadow of the mind, the sum total of memories. Pure being is reflected in the mirror of the mind as knowing. What is known takes the shape of a person because it's this It's this awareness reflecting in mind, which allows for the potential of objects. When objects appear in the mind, you're conscious of them, you see them. It takes the shape of a person or a bowl or a lamp based on memory and habit, based on having seen a memory of a lamp before, or talk to somebody else who has seen a lamp before and tells you that's a lamp. And now you've created an object, you've given it a name and a form, and you've defined it, and you've made it separate and apart from everything else in your world. And there it exists. But it's a composite, and it's a composite of the things that compose your world. It is but a shadow, right? It's a reflection of awareness. So if it's reflecting awareness, that means it itself is a shadow of awareness. So it's a shadow or a projection of the knower onto the screen of the mind, a projection of awareness onto the screen of the mind, observing content, observing objects through its ignorance, through the limitations of the senses delivering information. All right, the questioner, the mirror is there, the reflection is there, but where's the sun? Maharaj, the Supreme is the sun. This universal mind, the pure mind, the mind without waves, is what exists, which is existence itself, fundamental. The Supreme is the sun. Questioner, it must be conscious. Maharaj, it is neither conscious nor unconscious. Don't think of it in terms of consciousness or unconsciousness. It is the life which contains both and is beyond both, right? So know that it's the whole, it's the entirety, but that entirety and more, which means don't let your sense of the entirety include a boundary, right? Which means you ain't going to do it. Which is why he's telling you the question you're asking is actually nonverbal. It can't fall into the rules of disturbed mind. So the answer actually predates your question. All right, so that's a good place to stop. So let me stop the recording.